Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 7th of November 2023. There is the key to my map. If you want to know what the lines mean, please pause the video now. Before we go to the front line to look at the details of what's been happening, the Institute for the Study of War runs a number of sections on Evil Gherkin. If you remember Evil Gherkin, our good friend, the Russian ultra-nationalist mill blogger who was arrested and put in prison for, I don't know, speaking something approaching the truth. ISW says, imprisoned ardent nationalist and former Russian officer Igor Gherkin argued that Russian forces will be even less capable of offensive operations than they are now by spring 2024, given the current nature of Russian offensive operations along the front line. I do generally agree with this. Gherkin suggested that the Russian efforts to repel Ukrainian localized attacks across the front line and simultaneous fall-winter offensive operations will likely degrade Russian offensive and defensive potential by spring 2024. They've lost so much equipment and a lot of troops during this counteroffensive, but particularly in, say, Avdiivka, in Vuhledar to some degree, and even in other places along the front line, that I don't think they're in a position to do large-scale offensives successfully going forward until they have a massive reconstitution, a huge influx of new or refurbished equipment, and I don't know that they are going to get that, to be honest. It continues. I mean, each of these are massive paragraphs. I'm only reading you the synopses. Gherkin implied that additional Western military aid to Ukraine and the lack of mobilization in Russia could allow Ukraine to end positional warfare and conduct successful offensive operations in 2024. Obviously, this is looking a long way forward. I think Ukraine will be looking to reconstitute themselves, to get themselves into this much better position to have a successful counterattack, but that will revolve around, one, getting ammunition, a lot of ammunition stockpile, which they did for the counteroffensive, but they used it all up and didn't really move anywhere. So they're going to need ammunition, they're going to need equipment as per normal, but they're also going to need an awful lot of degradation of the Russian forces and logistics still, and that will happen as a result of distance strikes all throughout this effectively quiet period or autumn to winter period. The Russians may attack here and there, the Ukrainians may attack here and there, but in this time of regathering themselves, each side will be, well, the Ukrainians will certainly be focused on trying to hit Russian military targets. The Russians will be probably concerned with trying to take out the Ukrainian energy infrastructure and other targets, whereas I think, the Ukrainians are definitely going to be concentrating on the military in the occupied regions, as well as perhaps, as we see maybe in Taganrog today, targets within Russian territories too. Okay, going to the northeast, there isn't too much to report at all, actually, of the Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. There is activity going on along the front line up there, along that axis, but no confirmed changes for either side. All the usual places are reporting repelled attacks from one side or the other. Then we get down past Seversk front line to Bakhmut, and we'll really start the front line update here. As you can see, some gains, as according to Andrew Perpetua, in the Bakivka reservoir area, where the Russians have been pushing the Ukrainians back fairly consistently for some time now. The ISW says of the area, a Ukrainian source and several Russian mill bloggers additionally claim that Russian forces made gains near the Bakivka reservoir, and some sources claiming that Russian forces control the whole reservoir, some claiming they only control the southern shore. That would be odd for me to only control a southern shore, as if the Ukrainians are on a northern area. I'm not sure that works. There were claims originally when the Ukrainians were moving into Bakivka that there was some movement from the west, and there was the idea that the Ukrainians might have been up here, or they might have come across the what isn't a full reservoir anymore. There's only a small amount of water, I think, to the western side. But nonetheless, I doubt that the Ukrainians are on the northern shore at all. Further on, it says a Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces periodically attack across the railway line between Klishchiivka and Andriivka. Okay, so this is to come to the south of Bakhmut, where things have slowed down. There doesn't seem to have been too much of a Ukrainian momentum sustained here in moving forward and continually taking land like they were. They've had a stoppage of a good few days, and it seems that the Russians are attacking there themselves. Well, here the use of the word periodically, I think, is important, so that they aren't consistently attacking the area at the moment. And it could be down to weather, though. We must remember that the weather has been pretty poor in a number of places on the front line. Another Mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces are attacking along the entire Klishchiivka to Andriivka to Kurdyivka line, though. So it's not all consistent narratives being communicated here. The Ukrainian General Staff stated that Ukrainian forces continued offensive actions south of Bakhmut. So they are still active there, but whether they are as heavily attacking as they were previously, I guess we'll see. We'll come on down to Avdiivka now, where we have some other sources as well as the ISW. As you can see from the north here, the Ukrainians have been pushed back further, or the Russians have gained more control over the tree line to the southwest, or to the west of the railway line coming down past Stepover. So about that much tree line is now under their control, as according to the pro-Russian mapper Syriac maps. ISW states of Avdiivka that a Russian mill blogger claimed Russian forces broke through the railway line near Stepover and maintained control of the waste heap north of Avdiivka. So that could well be that area we're seeing there, and control of the waste heap is claimed by Russian mill bloggers. Still, and Mashevets, who's a Ukrainian observer, also reported that Russian forces captured territory in a segment of the front behind the railway line near the northern part of the coke plant. So this would suggest somewhere around here being taken by the Russians, depending on what mapper you look at as to where you think the Russians are and have been over the last 24-48 hours. Although ISW has not yet observed visual confirmation of this claim. And Ukrainian military observer Butasov, he's a journalist, warned that Russian forces are preparing for another wave of renewed assaults on Avdiivka with fresher reserves. Just, I guess the old sunk cost fallacy, or like, we started, we need to finish. I mean, we've got to make something of this. We piled in so many people and pieces of equipment into this area and not really gained what we are hoping to. We must plow in fresh reserves and more equipment into trying to do this. We must get more, and that's that kind of sunk cost fallacy. Or it might indeed be a successful approach for the Russians, because they seemingly can afford to waste many more men and troops than the Ukrainians in taking very small amounts of land, and they don't need a lot of land here. All they need to do is cut this supply road coming into from the west into Avdiivka, and in all honesty, all you need to do is advance another couple of kilometers either side of that road, either from the south through Siverny or from the north around Stepover or the coke plant, and then you can cause the Ukrainians all sorts of trouble. So they don't need that much land. It's whether they have got those troops and pieces of equipment, and whether they can succeed in pushing the Ukrainians back. To continue, Ukrainian forces reportedly counterattacked near Avdiivka and restored some lost positions as of November the 6th. A prominent Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces counterattacked near Krasnohorivka between the 3rd and 5th, and thereby forcing Russian troops to withdraw from part of the railway track. So that we saw recently that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back here, apparently. And that could be to what the ISW is referring, or the sources therein. But other than that, not too much to report in terms of mappers showing changes. Let's go to some of the claims here. Now, that's that bit of tree line that I was talking about. Russian army increased slightly the control over the sector of the railway east of Stepover, according to Syriac maps. And then actually we come on down to Krasnohorivka, to the south of Avdiivka. So not too much else to report there, though there will be a lot of activity, a lot of fighting still taking place there. And we come on to Krasnohorivka here, where, if we go to the ISW, is there claim? Yes. So this is and down to Novomykhailivka, actually, which is to the south of Mariinka here. It's Novomykhailivka, actually, that we're going to talk about. Sorry, I was getting myself confused. So what's the ISW have to say? Well, geolocated footage posted yesterday shows that Russian forces have advanced south of Novomykhailivka, about 12 kilometers southwest of Donetsk. They haven't advanced 12 kilometers. That's where Novomykhailivka is. So some advances by the Russians to the south, and we've got some geolocation here. Ukraine Ukrainian soldiers from the 79th Air Assault Brigade destroy Russian armored vehicles in the Novomakhilivka district. This is again another column and another bunch of vehicles destroyed. And of course, when you have this, it doesn't necessarily mean that that the Russians or either side, when they're attacking, doesn't mean they control those areas. So bear that in mind with these geolocations. Ukrainian soldiers from the 79th destroy Russian armored vehicles, and those have been geolocated to here. This is an MTLB that was destroyed. But again, if this is an attack, columns going through, it's more likely to be going through grey zones. So yeah, for me, although that position shows an advance from their Russian defensive lines, if you are attacking, you are necessarily moving from your defensive positions to another position. And if the Ukrainians have blown up this stuff, as is implied here, then that does not mean an advance. It means an advance of, at that time, of those vehicles into this area, into this grey zone, in an attempt to take control of the grey zone and push the Ukrainians back. But if that failed, then you would assume the Russians then go back to their defensive lines, and there is no advance in terms of exchange of territorial control. So, yeah, they advanced, but I don't think that shows control, and that's probably why neither of the mappers have shown any changes to the mapping there. But I guess what that tells us is the Russians are still trying really hard to attack, and they keep trying to attack up this tree line, up this in this direction towards Novomakhilivka. The grey zone now stretches right to the edge, according to Andrew Perpetua, of Novomakhilivka. So any activity in this whole area will necessarily be in the grey zone. It is tough there, and the Russians are really trying to take Novomakhilivka. That will give them, this domino effect that goes up to Marinka, arguably, in the same way that trying to take Novelska here gives them a domino effect for allowing them to encircle Avdiivka even more successfully. But yeah, they are losing a lot of equipment in trying to do all of these things. Right, now we come to Vuhledar, where there is quite a lot of activity, as you can see there. I don't know if it is mentioned particularly. No, it doesn't seem to get too much of a mention in the ISW unless I'm missing it. But we'll have a look at some of the sources here. So here we have Global War Monitor saying, as a result of their push around Vuhledar, this is where they sent in a load of equipment in the Mikhilska area to the east of end of Mikhilska, well, north of where that was taking place. Apparently, according to Syriac maps, the Russians have taken control, captured a small area around Mikhilska, according to Global War Monitor. And here you can see it's that fairly large area, I guess, comparatively speaking, that the Russians are claiming to have taken control of. As Syriac map says, during the past week, the part of the Frontline witnessed an escalation as forces tried to improve their positions. Russian army managed to advance some 100 meters north of Mikhilska, and the Ukrainian army managed to re-enter again to some buildings of the Dacha east of Pavlivka. So both sides taking some ground there, as according to Syriac maps, not according to anyone else at the moment. I know Global War Monitor said that, but I think large bases often bases stuff on ISW claims, not entirely, but it could be what's happened there. So it could be that the Russians have taken some ground going north towards a mine, which is northeast of Vuhledar, and then to the south of Vuhledar in the Pavlivka area, in the dachas between sort of Pavlivka and Mikhilska. The Russians might well have been pushed back. Syriac maps has the Russians moving back from basically this whole area there. As you can see by my pins, all the way back to the water feature there. So good news for the Ukrainians, I guess, if that's true, although struggling on the other side of Mikhilska there. Right, we'll come to the west now, and Velika Novosilka features, but not an awful lot, where we have had lots of activity in and around, not there, in and around Priutny. No movement today, though there are claims, so that's up in here. So yeah, this might be worth listening to. So the Russian Vostok Battalion, which operates in Donetsk and Zaporizhia border area, claimed that's Kadakovsky, claimed that current poor weather is unsuitable for high combat activity and that there are mostly artillery drills along the front line. A Russian mill blogger claimed that positional battles are ongoing in western Donetsk and eastern Zaporizhia regions. So that would be around here. Positional battles largely due to lack of visibility and poor weather. Geolocated footage published on the 6th indicates that Russian forces slightly advanced east of Zahirny, which is 11 kilometers southwest of Hulaypole. Well, let's have a look at that. So Russian soldiers in a fortification were hit by loitering munitions after being discovered by aerial recon of the 102nd Battalion of the Ukrainian 108th Territorial Defense, Dnipropetrovsk Brigade, and abandoned the position. So this took place here, and we'll plug this in, apparently showing some advance for the Russians. No, it doesn't really tell me anything. That's behind both mappers' Russian defensive lines, so it's exactly where you'd expect them to be. So yeah, I don't quite know why that shows a slight Russian advance, at least not according to the mappers that I use. Right, then we're going to go on to Robotyne here, and you can see that Andrew Perpetua has some gains for the Ukrainians to the west of Robotyne, and actually Surat Maps has gains as well, but the Surat Maps gains are into the grey zone in the area and not into the Russian lines, as you can see there. So small gains in the same place that Andrew Perpetua has gains as well. Right, let's see what the ISW has to say about Robotyne. A Russian mill blogger claimed that positional battles are ongoing near Verbove and that Ukrainian forces are trying to disrupt Russian defense systems, that's fortifications in the area. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces conduct periodic local attacks with limited forces near Kopani, Robotyne, Verbove, Novopokrovka, but they are unsuccessful. And another mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces took advantage of poor weather and limited visibility to conduct attacks at Verbove, but were not successful. So this is not as heavy fighting as there has been, as you can see by the use of the language. You know, limited attacks, periodic attacks, limited forces, so on and so forth. Then we can actually come to the west a little bit there, but you know, good that the Ukrainians are still putting pressure here and are making some gains, and that is towards Kopani, to see if they can sort of encircle Kopani perhaps, but still these major defense lines to the south of there unbreached in this area. Verbove, they are over those lines, but we just don't hear too much coming from there. Right, then as we come to the west towards Kamyanska, which apparently according to Russians is still not controlled by either side, but it has kind of two distinct sides to it that's split by the river. Nevertheless, Piatychatki, there is activity around there again after it being fairly quiet for some time. Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces repelled Russian assaults north of Nestorenka and near Piatychatki. A Kremlin-affiliated mill blogger claimed that Russian forces are attacking the Zaporizhia direction and attack near Piatychatki from the Kopani direction. So that's actually attacking there from the east. Nestorenka's over here, so some activity taking place there as well. So those two places featuring. Then we come down to Kherson, and I did my my breaking news piece last night on the activity here and the idea that there is perhaps mechanized equipment that has been transported across the river. Evidence for the first time, which is really significant. It was a post that came out from Romanov, the ultra mill blogger, Russian chap in the area. Ukrainian floating transporter PTS-2 making its way across the shores, almost certainly with a BTR on board. Itself has amphibious capability, so I don't know exactly where that was and how much stuff they've got across. There are differing rumors that are flying about. What was interesting to me is that first of all, the idea that the Russians who took that took that imagery, were kind of doom posting afterwards, saying there's 5 of us and only 2 of us are still alive, something along those lines. So they'd suffered in being there, but also that they're talking a lot about how electronic warfare is playing a role in this area. So while the Western magazines are competing in doom posting, Ukrainians continue stretching Russian defenses and striking their targets. Just a week ago, Ukrainians were still trying to get a foothold in Krinky, a settlement of an slightly unusual shape. Today, they're already infiltrating out of the area, so they're spreading from Krinky. They're getting equipment across, but also they are, and Trent Talenko talks about this, although not there, they are utilizing drone boats with drone pods or drone equipment, anti-drone equipment, electronic warfare equipment, words again, and they are using these up and down a river, so they are mobile. Previously, apparently, they got an electronic warfare station across the river to around the Antonivsky Bridge, and then the Russians just hit that whole area with an Iskander. Well, if you've got those on boats moving up and down, you can't hit them with Iskander missiles. The only thing you can hit them with are FPV drones, which are the exact things that those boats and electronic warfare stations on the boats are designed to invalidate. So it's a really good use of boats up and down this area. They need to make sure the Russians can't use drones to either spot for artillery or as FPVs, especially if you're getting equipment across here that will be enemy number 1. They'll be easily targetable. You get them across there, you can catch them as they're getting across. They won't be particularly mobile, and hit them with FPVs. It'll be a bit of a nightmare. So it's very clever that the Ukrainians have worked really hard, it appears, to make sure that they have good electronic warfare countermeasures to stop that from happening. And indeed, we can see that the Ukrainians are expanding their zone of control around Krinky, and I say around Krinky because they're moving to the south, and they're also moving along because it's a long, thin settlement that also has an area just here moving to the southeast, but they're moving along that. They're pushing the Russians back, and you can see that they really have taken quite a bit of ground around there. They only had this bit yesterday, and now, well, at least they don't control that, but it's the Russians don't control it. So they've pushed the Russians back successfully around Krinky, and I think that's good news for the Ukrainians. The ISW in the area states that Russian mill bloggers claim that Ukrainian forces retain their positions on the left bank. A Kremlin mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces still maintain positions in one part of Krinky, despite Russian efforts to push Ukrainian forces from the east bank of the Dnipro. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Ukrainian forces expanded control over positions north of Pistepny, which is, not there. That's somewhere else. That's down here. So expanding. We know yesterday they expanded their control, or at least they pushed the Russians back a little bit from there. So there are several places along the river in this general area that the Ukrainians are really trying to gain the upper hand. We look to see and hope from a pro-Ukrainian point of view that the Ukrainians can get some meaningful amounts of equipment across there to support their attack in the area. War Monitor recently said that Ukrainian loitering munitions have hit and destroyed an assault group of Russian forces along with military vehicles south of Krinky. And that could indicate an expansion of their activities. On foot, they'll have drone operators with them doing what they need to do, as well as drone groups on the other side of the river in relative safety. But yes, I think it's looking much more positive for the Ukrainians in the Kherson area, but these things are dynamic and I'm sure they can change quickly. It will be about stopping the Russians from using artillery and using drones in the area. That'll be their biggest key to success. And elsewhere, it's a bit of a mixed bag of nuts, but as I said previously, we've moved to a time where the Ukrainian counteroffensive is ground to a halt, and the Russians are pushing in a number of places trying to find that one weakness that they can exploit. And there you go. That's pretty much it for today. Hopefully that was of use. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care. I'll speak to you later.